At my mother-in-law's retirement dinner in Whistler, I arrived to find my name missing from the table. My husband laughed and said, "Oh, we must have miscounted the chairs. You know how these things go," while his family smiled at their plates. I set down my clutch, looked at him calmly, and said, "Seems I'm not needed here." I walked out of the lodge. 40 minutes later, they discovered I had canceled the entire weekend. The resort suite block, the private dining room, the helicopter tour I'd booked 6 months ago. Every single thing that existed because of me. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before that night to understand why what happened next felt less like revenge and more like finally breathing. My name is Isabel. I'm a corporate catering and events contractor based in Vancouver, which means I spend my life making other people's milestones look effortless. Product launches at the Vancouver Convention Center. Retirement galas for law firms in Yaletown. Rehearsal dinners in Gastown for couples whose guest lists read like a who's who of the Lower Mainland. I built my company, Clearwater Events, out of a shared kitchen space in East Van and a secondhand laptop 12 years ago. No family money, no investor, no connections, just a reputation for showing up and delivering every single time. That reputation was how I met my husband. His name is Derek. His mother is Margot Ashford. And the Ashfords are old Vancouver. Not tech money, not new money. Old money. The kind rooted in commercial real estate and a grandfather who owned half the warehouses on Burrard Inlet before the city knew what those were worth. They winter in Palm Springs. They have a membership at a club on the waterfront that doesn't advertise. They are the sort of family where everyone always knows the right thing to say and the wrong thing is never said out loud. I organized Margot's 65th birthday at the Hotel Vancouver 3 years before Derek asked me to dinner. She approved of my work without ever quite approving of me. When Derek introduced me as his girlfriend 6 months into our relationship, she said, and I can still hear it, "How practical. You'll never have to hire a planner." She said it with a bright smile while Derek laughed. I told myself it was a joke. It was not a joke. We got married on a Thursday afternoon in October at a small vineyard in the Okanagan. I planned most of it myself, which in retrospect was either the most professional thing I've ever done or the loneliest. Margot had thoughts about the flowers, about the seating arrangement, about the fact that I'd chosen a non-denominational officiant. She delivered these thoughts through Derek, always through Derek, with a softness that made them hard to argue against. Mother just wonders if, perhaps, Mother only mentioned because she cares. I learned early that with Margot, everything was cushioned in the language of caring. After the wedding, I became the invisible engine of the Ashford family's social life. Margot's charity luncheons, her annual garden party in West Van, her godson's engagement celebration, the family's Christmas gathering at their property on Salt Spring Island, which I organized every December with the precision of a military operation and the credit of a caterer who'd been comped. At family dinners, my work was described as Anna's little hobby, except my name is Isabel, and it stopped being a hobby when it started billing $200,000 a year. Derek noticed the disrespect in the abstract. He'd say, after dinner, on the drive home, "I know my mother can be a lot." That was his vocabulary for it. A lot. As though dismissing 5 years of my career and quietly rewriting my professional identity was just a personality quirk, like being too loud at the theater. He never corrected her in the room, not once. I noticed. I always noticed. But I stayed. The Whistler weekend was Margot's 70th birthday. She wanted a long weekend up at the mountain, a private dining experience, a helicopter tour over the Garibaldi backcountry, 2 nights in a block of suites at a resort I will not name because I still have professional relationships there. The entire thing was my project. I spent 4 months on it. I negotiated the helicopter rate myself. I sourced a local chef who'd done time at Hawksworth. I curated a wine list with help from a sommelier I trust. Total value of what I organized and put my company's credit behind, just over $38,000. I know that number because I had to look at it again later when I was reclaiming it. 2 weeks before the trip, I noticed something odd. Derek's laptop was open on the kitchen island. He'd walked away to take a call, and I wasn't snooping. I was refilling my coffee. But I saw the email preview. It was from his sister, Camille. Subject line, Whistler Logistics, keep it between us. I told myself it was a surprise for Margot, some extra thing they were organizing. I closed the laptop and said nothing. Then Derek started taking calls in the garage. Then his phone, which he'd always left on the kitchen counter, moved permanently to his jacket pocket. I am an events contractor. My whole job is noticing details other people miss. I am professionally trained to see what's happening in the room before anyone else does. So I noticed, and I started paying attention in a way I should have done years earlier. I didn't go looking for anything dramatic. I found a printed itinerary in the recycling bin, the kind that happens when someone forgets to shred, and it had my name on it, not as a guest, as a line item. Isabel's travel, confirm return Saturday a.m. Family dinner Saturday evening, 11, confirmed. 11, not 12. I counted the Ashfords without me. It came to 11 exactly. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that. Then I photographed the itinerary and put it back in the bin. I kept working on the weekend as though nothing had changed. I confirmed the helicopter booking. I called the chef to finalize the menu. I verified the dietary requirements for Derek's uncle, who has a shellfish allergy. I did all of it with a steadiness that surprised even me, because underneath the steadiness, something had shifted. Not broken, shifted. Like a load-bearing wall that had been quietly moved, and the house was only now starting to show the stress. 3 days before departure, I found the other thing. Derek was in the shower. His phone was on the nightstand. I'd never gone through his phone. I want to be clear about that, but it buzzed twice in quick succession, and the name on the screen was one I recognized. Haley P. Haley Pemberton. She'd been at our wedding. She was the daughter of one of Margot's oldest friends. She had given a toast at our rehearsal dinner that I'd organized. She was 2 years younger than me, had that particular kind of effortless prettiness that comes from never having had to work very hard, and she had laughed at every single thing Derek said all night. I told myself it meant nothing. Then I picked up the phone. The message thread went back 4 months. I won't catalog it, but I will tell you this. She was coming to Whistler. She was joining the family for the Saturday dinner, the dinner from which I was, apparently, already excluded. And she had asked Derek, in a message he'd replied to with a heart, whether he'd told me yet. He had not told me yet. He had not told me yet. I forwarded everything I needed to my personal email. Then I set the phone down exactly where it had been. Then I walked to the bathroom mirror and looked at myself for a moment. My hands were not shaking. I remember being surprised by that. I had 4 months of vendor contracts in my company name. I had deposits totaling $38,000 on my business credit line. I had relationships with every single person who was making that weekend possible. And I had 4 days to decide what to do with all of that. I chose to wait. I chose to go. I chose to let it unfold. Because I needed to see it clearly before I acted. And because every event I've ever run has taught me this, you do not improvise the finale. You prepare it in advance, you wait for your cue, and you execute. We drove up to Whistler on a Friday afternoon. The Coquihalla was clear, which felt like a small mercy. Derek talked about a podcast he'd been listening to for most of the drive. I asked questions at the right intervals and looked out at the mountains and thought about logistics. The resort was everything I'd promised it would be. The suites had floor-to-ceiling windows and gas fireplaces and views of the ski runs even in summer. I had arranged welcome bags for each room, local chocolate, a small bottle of BC wine, a handwritten card from the family. I had written those cards myself. Margot accepted hers without looking at me. "You've done a lovely job with the details, as usual," she said in the same voice she used to compliment the hotel staff. Friday dinner was cordial in the way that a frozen lake is cordial, smooth on the surface, cold all the way through. I sat at the far end of the table from Derek. I assumed this was an accident. By Saturday morning, I'd stopped assuming things were accidents. Saturday, I woke early and went to the lobby cafe while Derek slept. I sat with an Americano and my laptop, and I did what I always do before a big event execution. I made a list. Except this time, the list was not a run of show, it was a contingency plan. Every vendor, every contract that existed under my name or my company's guarantee. I mapped it all out. I noted the cancellation windows. I noted what was refundable to my account and what wasn't. I noted who I'd have to call personally versus who I could reach by email. Then I closed the laptop and went back upstairs and got ready for the day like everything was fine. The helicopter tour was in the afternoon. I had arranged for a private departure from a helipad outside the village, 8 passengers maximum per flight, which meant 2 trips for a group our size. I had organized it so the family went in the first group. I told Derek I'd follow in the second. He seemed relieved in a way that he tried to hide and didn't. I did not get on the second helicopter. I sat in the lodge at the base and made my calls. The resort coordinator, a woman named Diane who I'd worked with on 2 other events, picked up on the second ring. I explained that there had been a change to the account authorization for the Ashford block. I gave her my company information, which she already had. I told her I needed to reverse the guarantee on the suite block effective Sunday checkout and that the guests would need to provide their own payment method for any incidentals going forward. She asked one clarifying question, then said she'd process it. The helicopter company was next. The remaining deposit on the second trip, the return flight I'd booked for the full group, I redirected to a credit back to my business account. The chef confirmed our Saturday dinner reservation. I told him there had been a reduction in the party size and asked him to hold the table but adjust the covers. He said he'd note it. Then I called the private wine experience I'd booked for Sunday morning, a cellar tour at a winery 2 hours away, which I'd put on the company card as the final gift of the weekend. Cancelled. Refunded. Done. I ordered another Americano. I watched the mountains. When the first helicopter landed and the family came streaming back into the lodge, windswept and exhilarated, I was sitting near the entrance with my coffee and my calm in my coat. Margot saw me first. Something crossed her face, surprise, then adjustment, then the smooth expression she always found again so quickly. "You missed the flight," she said. "I know," I said. "I had some things to sort out." Derek came in last. When he saw me, he stopped walking for just a moment, a half-second stutter, and I understood that he knew, or suspected, and was calculating. He came toward me with the particular kind of warmth that is deployed when someone is uncertain of the situation. "Hey, we missed you up there," he said. "You should have been on that first trip." "I'm sure I should have been," I said. We walked to the dining room together, the whole family, in a procession of cashmere and ski boots and wine warmth, and I thought of every dinner I had organized for these people. Every table I had set, every vendor I had managed, every moment where my name was on the contract and my work was in the room and my presence at the table was treated as incidental. When we got to the private dining room, 11 chairs were arranged around the table. I counted them from the doorway. Derek looked at the table. Then he looked at me. He managed a laugh. "Oh, that's odd. Must be a mix-up with the restaurant. We'll get another chair." He said it so easily, like it was nothing, like I was nothing. Like I was nothing. I looked at him for a moment. Then I looked around the table at his family. Camille, who was watching me with something unreadable. Margot, whose expression had returned to its habitual pleasantness. His uncle and aunt, who were already reaching for the bread. And the empty seat that was not, I now understood, for me. I looked at Haley Pemberton, who had appeared from somewhere during the walk from the lodge and was now standing near Camille, her coat still on, pretending to check her phone. I said, quietly and clearly, "You didn't miscount. You just forgot to tell me." I picked up my clutch from the chair I'd been about to sit in, and I walked out of that dining room and through the lobby and out the front door of the lodge into the cold September air, and I didn't look back once. Outside, I stood for a moment and let myself feel it. Not anger exactly, something more like clarity, like the moment when you've been looking at something out of focus and the image finally sharpens and you can't unsee it anymore. I texted Diane at the resort. "Go ahead and apply the payment changes we discussed." Then I texted the chef, "Please inform the table that the event guarantee has been transferred back to the account holder on record. They will need to arrange their own payment for dinner tonight." Then I texted Derek, "All vendor guarantees for this weekend are in my company name. I've returned the deposits to my account. You'll need to handle payment directly with the resort and the restaurant. I hope the dinner is everything you planned." I walked across the village to the small hotel where I'd had the foresight and professional habit to book a backup room under my personal name, because I always book a backup. It's in my run-of-show template. Contingency lodging, confirm 48h prior. I checked in. The room was small and quiet and had a view of the valley. I ordered room service. I opened my laptop. I had a proposal due for a corporate client in Burnaby and I worked on it for 2 hours and it was, honestly, some of the best work I've done. Derek called 11 times between 7 and 9 p.m. I let them go to voicemail. Then the text started. The restaurant is saying the reservation isn't guaranteed. What did you do? Mother is very upset. This is embarrassing. Isabel, please answer. They want a credit card for the suite. I don't understand what's happening. Camille says you canceled the helicopter? When were you going to tell us? This is insane. Call me right now. And then, around 9:30, I know you saw the messages. I know that's what this is about. Please just let me explain. I didn't respond to any of them. I finished my proposal. I made a cup of tea with the kettle on the desk. I went to sleep at 10:30, which is the earliest I'd been to sleep in probably 2 years. I found out later, through a former colleague who works at the resort, that the dinner had proceeded eventually after Derek put the restaurant on his visa. But the suite charges for the weekend landed without my guarantee, and the resort had, politely but firmly, requested a card on file by end of business Saturday or they'd need to begin releasing rooms. Derek's card declined on the first attempt. His father eventually sorted it out, but it took long enough that there was a conversation at the front desk that several other guests overheard. The Sunday wine experience I'd canceled had been the thing Margot was most looking forward to. I know because she'd told me so 3 separate times. Camille had taken a video of her talking about it on the drive up. I drove back to Vancouver alone on Sunday morning. The sea to sky was beautiful in the way it always is. The ocean on one side, the mountains dropping straight into the water, and I turned the radio off and just drove. I'd been in that family for 8 years, 6 of them married, and I could not point to a single moment where someone had put a chair out for me that wasn't contingent on what I could provide. When I got home, I called my lawyer. Then I called my accountant. Then I made myself a proper breakfast, eggs, toast, actual orange juice, and sat at my own kitchen table in my own house and ate it without rushing. Derek came back Sunday afternoon. He looked the way people look when the story they've been telling themselves has stopped working. He stood in the kitchen doorway and said he wanted to explain. I let him talk. He said it had started 8 months ago. He said his mother had always thought Haley was better suited to the family. He said, and this is the part I keep coming back to, that he hadn't known how to tell me because he knew how much I'd given. He said it like that was a mitigating circumstance. Like knowing the size of what you're taking from someone makes the taking more defensible. I said when he was done, every contract for your mother's events for the last 4 years is in my company name. Every relationship with every vendor, every deposit, every guarantee, every professional favor I called in. I want you to understand that before we talk about anything else. He understood. He sat down. I told him I had documentation of the Whistler weekend in full. I told him my lawyer already had it. I told him the divorce terms I wanted were straightforward and that I had no interest in prolonging things for the sake of appearances, which was, I thought, a luxury the Ashfords could no longer quite afford. I want to be honest, I felt no satisfaction in that conversation, just an exhaustion that had been building for years and was finally allowed to rest. The divorce moved through quietly. We sold the house in Kitsilano, we'd bought it together, and divided the proceeds cleanly. I took my business assets, my client list, my professional relationships. I left the Ashford social calendar behind without a backward look. Margot called me once, 2 weeks after Derek and I separated. I let it ring. She left a voicemail that I've never deleted. She said, in that gracious, imperious voice, that she wanted me to know there were no hard feelings, and that she hoped I'd consider taking on the charity gala in the spring because no one understood her vision the way I did. I did not take on the charity gala. Clearwater Events had its best year on record the following year, partly because I had more time. Partly because clients who had heard through the particular gossip channels of Vancouver's event industry that I had walked away from a very lucrative family account rather than accept disrespect, those clients wanted to work with someone like that. Integrity, it turns out, is its own referral. I spent the following Thanksgiving weekend in Tofino with 2 friends who know how to sit in silence on a beach and not make it uncomfortable. We ate Dungeness crab at a picnic table. Someone brought a bottle of Okanagan Pinot. The ocean was doing what the ocean does on the West Coast in October, which is be enormous and gray and completely indifferent to human problems. I raised my cup to it. 11 chairs at that table was the best thing the Ashfords ever did for me. It showed me, with a kind of clarity that no conversation could have managed, exactly what I was to them and exactly what I was worth to myself. Those are two very different numbers, and I'd spent 8 years confusing them. I don't anymore. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from working too hard, but from working for people who have decided, quietly and without announcement, that your value is purely functional. I know that exhaustion well. I carried it for 8 years inside the Ashford family, and for most of that time I mistook it for love, or at least for loyalty. What I've come to understand, sitting with it, turning it over, is that the consequences we experience in life are rarely random. They accumulate. Every time Margot said Anna's little hobby and Derek said nothing, something was being built. Every contract I signed in my name, every vendor relationship I cultivated, every deposit I fronted, those weren't just professional choices. They were also a record, a quiet, documented record of who actually made things happen. The Ashfords never thought about that record because they never thought they'd need to. That's the nature of entitlement. It doesn't plan for accountability. I didn't set out to be someone who walks out of a dining room in Whistler and dismantles a weekend from a lobby cafe. I set out to be a good partner and a good professional, and honestly, a good daughter-in-law to a woman who is never going to let me be one. What happened at that retirement dinner was not a plan I made out of spite. It was the natural result of 8 years of choices, theirs and mine. They chose to exclude me from the table I had paid for. I chose to stop subsidizing a family that had stopped seeing me as one. That's the thing about integrity that nobody really prepares you for. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly accumulates the same way resentment does until one day you're sitting in a lodge lobby with an Americano and a clear head and you understand exactly what you're doing and exactly why it's right. That clarity, the kind that comes from actually knowing your own worth and being unwilling to negotiate it downward, is something I had to earn slowly. Through every ignored contribution, every deflected credit, every dinner where my name was on the reservation and missing from the conversation. Derek sat on my couch and said he hadn't known how to tell me because he knew how much I'd given. I think he meant it as an apology. What it actually was, without him realizing, was a confession. He had known. He had watched me give and he had let it continue because it was convenient. That kind of passivity is its own choice. It takes a certain intelligence, not cleverness, but genuine self-awareness to recognize the difference between someone who doesn't know they're causing harm and someone who knows and looks away. Derek knew. He just preferred the version of events where he didn't have to act on that knowledge. What I kept from that experience and what I'd want anyone in a similar situation to hold on to is this. The way you conduct yourself when you've been wronged says more about your character than anything you do when life is easy. I didn't scream in that dining room. I didn't make a scene at the front desk. I made phone calls. I reclaimed what was mine by contract and by right, and I walked back to Vancouver with my professional reputation intact and my personal one improved. That's not coldness. That's resilience. The kind that comes from having built something real from the ground up that no one can take from you when they decide to leave your name off the guest list. 11 chairs. That's all it took, and I wouldn't change a single one.